I have to share with you a dilemma before I start. It's the first time I've been to South by Southwest. I live up in Boston, and I wasn't quite sure what to wear. I'm a corporate guy, right? So I came down today, I'm sitting in the room, and I finally figured out what you wear. You gotta wear either a camera or you gotta wear a computer. That's the key to being here, right? Okay, so let's move forward. Here's our topic for today. We're gonna talk about Panera Cares. Panera Cares is a bit of an experiment, a bit of an innovation project, a test of humanity. Let's give you some sense of it, and let's begin, if we can, Kate, and let's shift, and let's just talk a little bit about where it comes from. Panera Cares couldn't happen if we didn't have the capabilities to do it. And so Panera Cares is enabled by something else. It's enabled by the success of Panera. Panera is a $5 billion market cap company. It's an overnight success in 30 years. It's 8 million customers per week. And Panera is 1,600 bakery cafes in 44 states and Canada. What else do we want to tell you about Panera? You want to flip it? Okay. Go ahead. Panera has been the single best performing restaurant stock, inclusive of everybody you know, from Starbucks to McDonald's, the single best restaurant stock when measured over the last 5 years. In fact, it's been up 400%, fourfold over those 5 years. And if you go back 15 years, the company's had a track record of 5,000% growth, or 50-fold increase in its stock price. So all of that is good. All of that enables what we're about to talk about today. What we're about to talk about today couldn't be happening if we didn't have this as the basis. Okay. So from my perspective, as the company's founder, I've been doing this, as I said, 30 years, back to when I had hair like Kate. I've been doing it long enough that I have my own definition of what success means. And I have my own definition of how I see the company. And so the lens through which I judge Panera is different. To me, our financial success is a byproduct. All those things I just showed you on the prior page, that's not something we create. It's a byproduct of our ability to make a difference in the lives of millions of guests. We serve, as I said, 8 million guests a week, sort of 3 or 4% of America every week, to make a difference in their lives, to make a difference in the lives of those tens of thousands of associates. And ultimately, Panera's success has been rooted in the ability to make a difference in the communities in which we operate. And to be truthful, this is where we've been for 30 years. Now, I have a friend who'll be speaking, I think, tomorrow, John Mackey from Whole Foods. John just did a book on this. He calls this phenomenon conscious capitalism. I said to John when I last saw him, we've been doing this for 30 years. I just never knew what the title was. But the reality is this is out of that same view, that the way you run a company, what you do with a company, is you start by making a deposit. And when you make a deposit in the lives of people, you're able to have something come back to you. And so what we often call shareholder value or stock price and all those economic goodies, they can't be created by working on them. They get created as a byproduct of doing something else. And Panera Cares is rooted in that viewpoint of the world. It's rooted in that kind of philosophy. Okay, let's flip. All right, Panera has also done something else for me, and it's very personal. Because when we talk about our businesses, when we talk about our work, it's a personal phenomenon. It's not simply something that's separated from who we are and what we are. And Panera, for me, has been an extraordinary opportunity to learn about life personally, and as much as anything, to care for others. It's sort of a way in which I'm able to go and do my thing. I often say to people, the greatest gift I get, the greatest payment I get from my work, is the opportunity to actually watch people, see people, and to learn about life and figure out how I make a difference in life. And in actuality, this is a picture with me and my son, my 14-year-old son. We were working at a Panera Cares. He's worked at every one of our Panera Cares, and it's been an opportunity for me to teach him something of what we value and what we care about as human beings. Okay, let's flip it, Kate. So here's a question. I like to kick this off. In which country in the world is 1 in 4 children struggling with hunger? The U.S.? Well, let's take a couple of options. Throw one up. Is it South Africa? No. Is it? You guys look smart. You all answered quickly. I'm not doing this alone. This is an interactive conference, right? We're going to interact. We're going to talk together. So is it South Africa? Wow, this is a smart group, Kate. We're not used to this kind of group. All right, is it South Africa? No. All right, how about China? God, no. The responsive reading here. Okay, let's move on. Is it Mexico? Oh, man, those guys down at the south of the border, they got to have a huge problem with food, right? No. Okay, Kate, they're building to our conclusion. Is it the United States? You got it. It's the United States. Right? It's hard to believe. I mean, we make joke of it, right? But this is the richest, strongest country in the world. The richest and strongest. And what do we see? Let's flip it, Kate. What we see in the United States is 1 in 4 children. 1 in 4. 1 in 4 children go to bed at night not knowing where their next meal is. At least they have sometime in the last year. 1 in 4. We're talking about 60 million people. That's a huge number, isn't it? Right? I mean, we're talking about huge, huge numbers of people. And let me tell you something else. 1 in 6 Americans, including adults, live in food insecure homes. And this isn't something I made up. This is the U.S. Department of Agriculture statistics. Flip it to the next one, would you? This is a little cartoon we found. Right? What is this thing called food insecurity? I love this. Right? You know, hunger, a thing of the past in the good old USA. Great news, you guys. The USDA says we're no longer hungry. We're just food insecure. And if you look down in the corner, I love this, and you're not homeless either. You're just home insecure. I mean, think about it. What we're talking about is people who don't know where they're going to get their next meal. This isn't some isolated little problem. This is at the very core of what life itself is, and the sustaining of life. And when you start to look at the problems of food insecurity, and we began to understand some of this as we did a lot of community work, when you start to look at the problems of insecurity, let me tell you something about it. Right? It's not isolated. It's not in some other place. 34% of the people with food insecurity are working. They're working poor. 34%. 24% of the people that are food insecure have their own homes. They own a home, but they can't pay for the food to sustain themselves. They're living hand to mouth. 23% of them are college graduates. This is us. Right? We're not talking about some man or woman who's pushing a shopping cart up the street who's been deinstitutionalized and is at the margins of society. This is at the core of our middle-class society. It's in our communities. It's in our neighborhoods. It's where Panera resides. In fact, only 10% of the people that are suffering from food insecurity are homeless. So you've got to understand how endemic this issue is and how real it is. All right, let's flip it, Kate. All right, so let's get into Panera Cares. Let's talk about how Panera Cares emerged and what it is and what we can say about it. Let's flip to the next one. Here's why Panera Cares was created. Panera Cares was created essentially to apply our philosophy of making a difference in the communities in which we operate and to do so in new ways. See, here's the reality. Right? We're giving presently, we have for many years. We bake our bread fresh every day. It's the core of Panera's philosophy. So nothing is carried over to the next day. So what do we do with all the bread that isn't sold? Because we can't sell it down or we'd be out of stock at midday. What have we done with it? For a very long time, we've given it away to food shelters and homeless shelters. And we'll talk about that. But Panera has come, its success has come from making a difference in these communities. And we wanted to understand how do we take that philosophy and actually do something more. Okay, let's talk about something else. It was also created, Panera Care was also created to utilize our existing strength directly in service to others. See, I said to you, we give $100 million in product away, product in cash, but somehow that felt disconnected. We did it, we wrote it, but it wasn't us. It was a department within the company that wrote the check. And it wasn't really at the core of Panera. It was at the core of our soul, but it wasn't at the core of our behavior. And what we were looking for is how we take an opportunity, how we find an opportunity actually, to put our own bodies on the line and do something more than just write that check, because that has an inherent hole to it. Okay, let's swing it. Okay, what else? Why else was it created? To learn about the nature of humanity. Right? A lot of people say that most of us are just simply self-interested souls that are gaming each other. Is that true? I mean, basically, Panera, I'm seeing all the heads go, yup. We're going to see before this is over. The reality of Panera is has grown and has been evolved with an optimism that people are fundamentally good, and if we are to give them a good experience, it will have good for everybody. So it was a test of the nature of humanity. Right? And what else was it meant to do? And very importantly, it was meant to raise the level of awareness about an issue that needs to be discussed, food insecurity. To be clear, anything that Panera does, Panera Cares, anything we create, the reality is we're not going to fix it. We're not going to solve this problem. We're not up here saying to you this is the solution to solve the problem. There's nothing worse in my mind than a hypocrite. The real thing, we're going to help a few people, and we'll talk about what that means and what a few means. But the reality is, the real key to this whole thing is to elevate the discussion. And I wouldn't be here today talking about this if we didn't have Panera Cares, if we didn't have an opportunity to elevate that discussion for all of us. Okay, so let's go on. Let me give you the inspiration for this, where it really came from. You know, as I said to you, for many, many years, we've been giving this product away every night. And this happens to be a picture of a volunteer picking up the leftover bagels at the end of the night in one cafe from a Panera associate. This occurs in, thousands and thousands of locations every single night. You're not sure what I said? Okay. All right. She's got the camera on me and the video and the audio. Okay. So the inspiration came from this experience we have giving the product away every single night. And one of the things that happened to us, it was maybe 4.5 years ago. And I read a piece about our product that had been given away floating down the Indiana River. It had been given to a homeless shelter. They had too much of this product. They didn't have anything to do with it. They couldn't use it. They threw it in the trash. That trash then got tossed into the river. And they had a big piece in the Indianapolis paper about these bagels rolling down the river. And I began to say to myself, God, we have all this beautiful product. We could do so much more with it. How do we do it? And I began to think to myself, maybe we run restaurants. Maybe we should forward integrate and try to figure out how do we use some of this product. Maybe we could open up our own little Pepperidge Farm style thrift shop and sell it to folks at very low prices and actually use it. And how do we actually play it? We know how to run these things, right? Well, that was sort of floating in my head. And then one thing happened. Let's flip it, Kate. I was watching, this was 3.5 years ago. It was the height of the recession. And we were all watching, my wife and I watched the nightly news about 11 o'clock. We TiVo it, and it's the thing we do before we go to bed. And I was watching this piece on Brian Williams, nightly news. And in this piece on nightly news, he began to talk about a cafe. He began to talk about this cafe called The Same Cafe in Denver, Colorado. And he said this was a community cafe. And my ears perked up. He said a community cafe is no set prices. It's a place that its intention is to feed everybody with dignity. And the responsibility of everybody in there, it's a cafe of shared responsibility, is to come in and leave what they have the capabilities to leave what they can leave. If you got a few more dollars in the pocket, the responsibility is to leave more. If you have less in your pocket, leave less. And if you have nothing, leave less. And the part that really struck me about this as I heard the story is these guys had been working on this cafe for 10 years. It took them 10 years to get it open. They've been struggling. It was an extraordinary accomplishment to open this little storefront with 40 seats. And they were so excited about it. And then I began to think, and I began to talk to my wife. And we're laying in bed at 11 o'clock at night, and I said, Nance, this is a sin. Right? We open a restaurant somewhere in the country every 72 hours. We've been doing this for 10 years, opening at that rate. I mean, we have 80,000 people. We have equipment up the yin-yang, we don't know what to do with, right? And these guys are struggling for 10 years. We could do this. And then I began to think some more, and I said, if we could open one of these community cafes using our baked goods, it's an opportunity to contribute in a new way to the community. And that's really what we're searching for. And maybe more importantly, not what was it only an opportunity to contribute, but it came from us. We could actually put our own bodies on the line and actually go out and do it. And then there's a certain part of me that's sort of like an asshole. I like to tweak, right? Being straight, right? There's a part of me that loves to challenge. And I thought to myself, I felt it for so long, that so much of us in corporate America, right? We isolate our programming in corporate social responsibility. It's all a marketing thing. It doesn't come from within. And I really feel as if we in corporate America have been such beneficiaries. I mean, this is where it's come from. You know, our whole perspective is not simply to extract from our communities, but to give back. And I thought it would be a wonderful challenge, quite frankly, to other corporations to say, hey, we're going to take our core competencies and use them in an explicit way for the good of the community. And could we, by doing that, actually challenge other people, engage the discussion, challenge other people to do so? Okay, so let's flip it over. So what we ultimately concluded, we had this idea. It's just a hypothesis. But our hypothesis was that Panera's nation-spanning scale provided a powerful opportunity for us, an opportunity to apply our skills and our resources directly against the problems of food insecurity, to do something in a direct way. So let's see how it began to take form. Right? After we began to have this hypothesis, just like any innovation you all work on, I do the same thing, we then began to say, okay, how do we take form with it? What do we do? And what did we do? We began to study the folks in the community cafe movement, very good people. We traveled the country to see them, and we began to think if there were new approaches to the problem that were consistent with who Panera was. So let's flip it over, Kate. Okay? What did we see? We traveled the country, and we began to see tiny facilities and used equipment. That's basically what the community cafe movement was. Very tiny facilities and used equipment. And what else did we see? We saw donated spaces. Typically, the community cafe was in the back of some church, around the corner to get in. They were in donated spaces with used equipment, and it just had you could just feel that. And what else did we see? We began to see very few people being served, not because people didn't have the need, and not because the folks in the movement didn't want to do well, but they didn't have the resources, and they didn't have the kinds of environments, and they didn't have the scale, and they didn't think as we did as a commercial operation what it meant to really attract and engage with customers. And then there was a very personal experience. We spent some time visiting soup kitchens and food pantries, but we did so not as guests from the development department, you know, with folks that could write a check. I personally went into several, and I went in as clients. I went into one in Salt Lake City. I had been skiing, actually, in Park City. I left my kid on the ski slope, got in trouble with the wife, but I left him skiing, and I drove down to Salt Lake City. And I came in, I was in ski clothes. I hadn't shaved in 3 days. I definitely looked like somebody in need. And I walked in, and what I felt, and what I felt every time I walked in, is I felt the pain of the people in there. Everybody was in pain. Everybody was hungry. Everybody had need. And you get in line. I felt that, right? I could just, and I became part of that. And you looked around, and everybody was walking around with their heads looking down, looking at their feet. And and it just invaded the place. And it really struck us. And it was really an important thing. This couldn't be about just feeding those in need. Because if it was, we would devolve to being the same as every one of them. The ethos, the environment, the way it would come together would feel like a place for those in need, and that was it. And what we were really trying to do at its core, what the vision of Panera Cares really was to elevate for everybody to a level of dignity we wanted to give to our paying guests. So let's swing it, Kate. Where did it leave us? We began to think about it. That original vision that started as baked goods, just simply baked goods and a little bit of coffee, we began to say, you know what? If we really want to attract people, if we really want to do something and elevate it for those in need, we have to have an experience as good as the one we charge people for. Right? Otherwise, we were kidding ourselves. It was a two-level system. And we began to say, if we really were serious from a nutritional perspective, if we really wanted to be of integrity, we had to put the full menu on the line, right? The full-bore Panera experience. And I'm not just talking about the baked goods that were left over. I'm not just talking about the coffee that's cheap and has a low food cost. I'm talking about the expensive stuff like the antibiotic-free chicken. I'm talking about the stuff like the organic ingredients. I'm talking about the shrimp. And we began to say, you know what? If we had any guts, we would do this thing, and we would put the entire Panera menu out there with the same cost structure. And then that led us to something else. We began to say, you know, if we're going to put the entire menu out there, if we really were committed to doing this thing right, we'd put the Panera name on it. And we would go out with a standard that we held ourselves to. And that standard would be everything in that cafe had to be good enough to attract a paying customer who chose to pay, who paid willingly because it was worth it. And if we did that, we would elevate the experience for everybody. And the key thesis became not to let this devolve to be a secondary experience, but to put a primary experience out there that elevated the experience for everybody. Okay, what else did we begin to think about? All right, as we began to conceptualize this, we began to realize we had a challenge. How do you price this stuff? Right? How do you price it if you want to have a cafe that serves those in need and also is someplace that those that have the means are willing to come to? How do you price it? Let me tell you, we couldn't have a 1099 check at the door, could we? Right? That wasn't going to work. So how do you price it? And then how do you collect the money? So we began to price it by saying we'd have a suggested donation. And then there was a big moment of decision for us. Where does the money go? A lot of people in the community cafe movement use cash registers as a way to collect it. But as we visited, we felt somewhat insecure. We felt somewhat hypocritical in that. Because if we really wanted to protect people's dignity, if we're really going to be honest about it, we didn't want to know what they were leaving. We had to leave them the protection and take the risk of leaving them the protection to leave their money in a way in which we really didn't know. And so we came up with the idea, we saw it in one of them, we took the bold step of putting the money, at least the cash of it, into a donation bin. Right? So all the money for these, or at least all the money other than what people put on a credit card, is placed in donation bins in front of what normally would have been the registers. And there are still devices there to communicate to the sandwich makers, but basically the cash is collected in donation bins like you see here. Right? And again, set up so we don't see what's going on. All right, what else? What else happened for us? We had to think about where you locate these. Where do you put them? How do you do this? And we reached the conclusion that the right place to put them was in economically diverse neighborhoods, eclectic neighborhoods. The first one of these we began to think about opening, we opened in a place I actually had lived in St. Louis many, many years ago. It was an eclectic neighborhood. It's called Clayton. You got the jailhouse across the street. It's on the end of the city transportation system. You got lots of people in need and in pain, but you also have $1 million townhouses around the corner. The reality is that this kind of concept needs both. And if we simply placed it in the worst of neighborhoods, this would not be self-sustaining. It could not survive. On the other hand, it would be extraordinarily hypocritical of us if we put it in neighborhoods where there was no need. And so the trick for us was to find neighborhoods where it worked from both sides. Okay, let's swing it up. All right, here's another challenge we had. This is a public company. What do I tell my shareholders? They don't think this is a good idea. In fact, they get a little nervous. Is Ron going to give the whole chain away on us? I mean, what are we going to do here? How do you organize this? You know, where does it end? This happens to be when we originally listed on NASDAQ. My son climbed in this picture as well. He's in the corner. He was a lot younger. But here's what we ended up understanding how to approach this. How do you segregate it? And it actually served our mission very well. We made the decision that Panera, corporate Panera, the public company, would contribute these restaurants. For example, we just built one in Boston. We spent $1 million to build that restaurant. We then took that restaurant and we donated it to a 501c3, a completely separate entity called the Panera Foundation. And then this is run in the Panera Foundation. The Panera Foundation, therefore, has only one mission. That is to break even. It has no profit goal. It has no need to make a profit. And in fact, if revenues exceed expenses, we have the opportunity to do something else with the money. So we segregated this from Panera, though Panera certainly has come through, not only in giving us these cafes, but Panera has come through as importantly and as significantly in giving us all the support team that works on this, and the overhead and the national contracts and everything else. So we leverage off of Panera But Panera, and I have a dual role as a CEO in Panera, but this is not Panera in a legal sense of the word. Okay, so what else? Right? Like every innovator, there's always a moment of truth. Lots of talk, lots of hypothesis, lots of brainstorming, lots of research, a determination of what matters, a determination of how you're going to go to the market. But then ultimately, you got to make the leap. You got to jump off the high diving board. So we jumped off the high diving board on May 6th, 2010. And that's actually the opening of that very first Panera Cares Cafe in Clayton, Missouri. Let's flip it over once more. Okay, I did what all innovators do. Anybody who tells you that innovation is about the great idea, they don't know anything about innovation. Because innovation begins with ideas, but it's followed up with execution and iteration and readjustment of the hypothesis, and then more iteration and more iteration. And I knew if we were going to make this work, and I was going to follow through on it, I need to go and work it. And I spent the next month, something I hadn't done in many years, honestly, working 80 hours a week in that cafe, running it. And I ran it not to run it, but to learn, and to see where it was going to work and where it wasn't. And let me share with you some of what I began to learn. The first problem I had was, how do you communicate the concept? Just think about this, right? You've all been to restaurants. We did the statistics. The average visitor to a restaurant has been in a restaurant 20,000 times. And every time it's been the same. There's a menu board, and there's a price on the menu board. Right? We weren't going to put a price up there. And Kate, this young woman who's sitting here, has worked with me throughout this whole thing. She's one of the people that runs Panera Cares. And I remember Kate and I spending tens of hours trying to write the copy, the signs, to convey the concept. You may not be able to see it, but our main thesis was, take what you need, leave your share, your fair share. Panera Cares is a community cafe that exists to address the very real problems of food insecurity in this country. That's why we're here. We're not about a handout. We're about a hand up for those who really need it. All we ask is that you leave your fair share to support our nonprofit cafe. You know, this is a nonprofit cafe that relies on shared responsibility. We trust you'll do the right thing. Unbelievable amounts of work to get this right. Every customer ignored it. They had no clue what to do, right? It just teaches you about language, right? Right? You know, they got to understand it. So what was the first thing that we did, right? First thing that I did was jump out from behind that counter, because I began to see all these people confused by what to do. And so what we decided to do right up front was to take a different approach to how we communicate. We created talking signs, I call them, greeters. I got out, and then people followed me, and we began to greet every person at the door and explain to them what this was, how this worked, and what it meant to be responsible in this context. If you had more, leave more. If you have only so much, leave what you can. And if you have nothing, leave nothing. The only thing we'd ask you to do if you leave nothing is to volunteer to help us, for 1 hour, not making sandwiches, but cleaning up the tables. Right? But do the right thing. And that greeter became central to the concept and is still part of it today. What else did we learn, Kate? We began to learn we had to deal with human nature. The hardest part of those first couple of weeks of this was to watch people. And there was these moments, these ups and downs that were huge. I can remember I'm there a couple of days, and some young person walks in, a high school student. Somebody told me he played on the high school football team. And he walked in and said, we'll have 4 turkey bacon bravos, and we'll have 3 of those Greek salads, and throw in a smoothie. And here's my dad's credit card. Put $3 on it as a gift. I just wanted to jump across the counter and kill the kid. I mean, I just wanted to hop over the counter and string him around the neck. And there were people holding me back. And there's these moments you get so depressed because you go, don't you have a clue? Don't you get what this is about and what you're doing? And, it's not a game, right? And then there was the guy who walked in the door, and I love this one, right? He worked over at City Hall. He came in, right? And he said, hey, I've been sent by City Hall to bring 200 sandwiches back. Can we have them? Hey, buddy, that's not what this is about, okay? You're going to take those sandwiches and what, sell them on the street, give them to your friends? This isn't what it's about, right? And those were downs, and there was intense downs. And then there were people who would walk in the door, and they'd have, you just assumed this was really somebody in need. They had nothing. And they'd put $20 in the bin. right? And you knew that they left more than what it cost, and they were there to help. Right? And then I can remember one guy who came in on like the third day, and he said, "Could I speak to you? You're one of the guys that run this place, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Look, let me tell you something. I've been a Panera customer for life. Right? I've been coming to Panera for 10 years. I'm a tech writer." Maybe this is one of you. "I'm a tech writer, right? I lost my job. I have 3 kids. I didn't have enough money saved. Truth is, I didn't know where I was going to feed them tonight. I just want to say thank you for being here and giving us a place we could all eat." You know, and it touched you. Right? This was me. This wasn't somebody else. This was us. You know, and it wasn't charity. It was doing the right thing, taking care of each other. And we began to understand we had to manage our own feelings. And that was actually very hard, to not react to the jerks and how we held ourselves because we understood there were good people that were benefiting. What else did we learn? We learned that the team members themselves were a concern that had to be dealt with. You know, the truth of the matter is, some of our own team members, we had team members here that had been working in this cafe for 10 or 15 years, that first one. This was a long-standing Panera. We have long turnover, tenure. But they're making $10 or $15 an hour. They're not getting rich on this. They're part of the working poor, straight up. And the reality is, many of them had had food insecurity in their own lives. And I can remember when we first told them about this, they had tears in their eyes because they understood the problem. They felt the problem. And I remember one woman, Miss Beth, about 76 years old, who on the day we opened came up to me and said, "You know, Ron, I know I had to be here at 6 a.m., but I went to church at 4 a.m. to pray for this place. This place is a really good thing. We need this." You know, and it's very true. And I can remember, and this was the hard part, our own people began to be defensive of the place. And the challenge for us was to help them understand, in trying to support the place, how not to start to judge people and prejudice people as they came in and what they left. And either to be angry at the people that didn't leave something, or to start to say, "Hey, that person isn't going to leave something, we're going to defend the place." And so we had to go through a ton of training with our own people. You did not think this. Our own people to hold the discipline and make sure they knew our job was to protect the person coming in, not protect the company. What else, Kate? All right. The other learning is we needed a mechanism for volunteers. All these people started coming in and saying, "I like this. What am I going to do? How do I help?" And we began to understand we needed to take care of those folks. And we began to develop a volunteer corps, of which became a central part of how we operate this, of people that were volunteering to help, including many of the people that had no money. People don't want a handout. They want help, but there's so many people that just they don't have the capability, but they actually want to figure out how to contribute in another way. Okay, what else? Okay, so let's bring it forward. Did it work? Right, this is responsive reading now. Did it work? What do you think? Are we nuts? Yes, it did work. All right, let's tell you about it. All right, 3 years later, the amazing part to me is the degree at which people have been touched by this concept. I didn't know whether people would think I'm a nut or not for doing this, you know, but I can tell you, I would suggest about 1 in 5 people really get this. For 1 in 5, this is really an important thing. It's an extension of a lot of our Judeo-Christian values. It's an extension of the way we want to live our lives. It's an extension of what we think it means to be a citizen, what it means to be part of a society and part of a community. You know, for many people, it's irrelevant. And then there's a tiny core that think this is the worst thing that ever happened. Right? I don't know how it worked out, but I, who built a $5 billion market cap company, have been called a communist I don't know how many times for this. I am about as uncommunist as you can get, okay? But somehow this is a socialist strategy, right, to take over the world by helping people. I don't get it. I also found it interesting. I've become a hero on evangelical radio, this nice Jewish boy from Brookline, Massachusetts. It's actually been very interesting, the whole process of who it touches. But actually, I am amazed at the number of people it touches, and good people who it touches, who get it, who get that this is the kind of country we want to live in, this is the kind of society, and this is who we really are as people. The whole world isn't bad, and everybody isn't gaming us, and everybody isn't out to screw us. Okay, let me show you something just a little bit about it. This is some of the media that's picked it up. And to be straight with you, I'm always a little embarrassed about this. But we've had over 2 billion media impressions based on this. We've been on every major national news. We've been in every major publication. The New York Times did a piece saying it would never work. But most people actually support New York. I'm from New York. All right. But most people were very, very were positive. And what the media was fascinated by is, what would people do? What is the nature of humanity? Because this is a living test of the nature of humanity. It's a living test of what kind of people we really are. It's a mirror and a reflection for that. And the media was fascinated by the question of not only will it work, but why it works and what it's about. Let me give you a sense of it. This is a piece that ran on CBS Morning News and the Evening News. It'll give you some sense of just both visually how it is, but it will also give you a sense of some of the issues that get raised. Go ahead, Kate.
This is the CBS
Turn up the
Morning
volume.
News for Monday, December 27th, 2010. There's at least one company in the nation where business means more than just serving the bottom line. They're making sure food is served for all who come through its doors. This unique approach is earning praise as well as profits. Cynthia Bowers reports.
Thank you very much for being a part of us.
At Panera Bread Company, the nation's best-performing restaurant chain,
Thank you so much.
the breaking of bread with customers is an opening day tradition.
Some people cut a ribbon. We share bread.
But what's happening at this Dearborn,
want to take
Michigan
1
store
minute
is
and tell you what we're
decidedly
doing to
non-traditional.
We made a decision to take this store and literally give this store to the community.
To make sure everyone gets a meal, even if they can't afford one.
Panera Cares, as it's called, doesn't list prices on its menu board.
Thank you very much.
It suggests donations instead.
You just leave more or less in the donation box.
The pay what you can concept is founder Ron Shaich's way of offering more than a simple handout to those in need.
I'm only working part-time right now, so on days that I can afford it, it'll be great, and on days that I can't, I'll definitely take use of it.
But for some customers, the new concept can be difficult to grasp.
What difference does it make if I paid $3.70 or $4, or if I paid you 25 cents?
In order for this experiment in human nature to work, customers able to pay
I'm just going to do a large coffee.
have to sometimes be willing to donate more than their fair share.
That was the big risk here. Will the community step up and take on shared responsibility?
This Dearborn location is the company's second such store. The first, which opened 7 months ago in St. Louis, is doing better than skeptics predicted.
Financially, it is working. We're making enough money to become self-sustained. We're able to pay the labor, the food, the rent.
In St. Louis so far, 60% of customers are donating the suggested amount. 20% are donating more, 20% donating less. Shaich says a restaurant's location is key to staying afloat.
We have to be in communities in which there are both people that can sustain it and people that can benefit from it.
Some companies do good to capitalize on the holidays or to clean up after a PR nightmare. But marketing experts say what Panera is doing makes no business sense, which could be business genius.
The best kind of PR
She didn't look at the market
is
cap.
getting caught in the act of doing something good. And this is a classic case of that.
It's easy to get behind feeding your neighbor.
And it's that appetite for giving that Panera is counting on to help them give back. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Dearborn, Michigan.
Okay, so let's tell you a little bit more about what's happened 3 years later. We now have 5 of these open, 5 of them, across the country. Let's begin. We have St. Louis, Missouri, the first cafe. It's now been open 3 years. Detroit, Michigan. We decided Detroit needed this. We brought it to Detroit, Michigan after St. Louis. And then from there, we went out west to Portland, Oregon, the Hollywood district. Very eclectic neighborhood, if you know Portland. It was an interesting experience because we had young people. It's a transit point for young people with drug problems. And we had to manage a whole range of issues there. But ultimately, that succeeded in a very strong way. We then went up to Chicago, Illinois, and opened at the corner of Halsted and Diversey. Again, right downtown where you had people with need and people with pain. And then ultimately, for me, we brought it home to Boston. This is across from Government Center, directly in downtown Boston, around the corner from the New England Home the Home for Homeless Veterans around the corner. We now have all 5 of these up. This is our most recent one. Okay, let's go forward. What else? I want to tell you something. It's amazing to me, but across all of these cafes, they are essentially self-sustaining. Now, self-sustaining means we got to cover the direct food, the direct labor, the rent. Panera takes care of all the indirect expenses, but we're covering those costs. And this is across millions of transactions that we're actually paying for. And the truth is, this could not survive if it weren't self-sustaining. Any model of support to the community has to ultimately be self-sustaining because resources are limited. Okay, so let me tell you something else about it. All right? This is the amazing thing to me. This is not going to fix poverty or hunger. But the reality is, we will serve 1 million people in these cafes this year. 1 million people. We're doing something in a small way in the communities in which we operate. And let me tell you something else. All right? Maybe as important as anything, what makes this work, it's also moved our own family. You know, I had this strange sensation. I do a lot of speaking within Panera, and every time I'd speak, I get a standing ovation when I mention Panera Cares. And the reality is, they weren't applauding for me. They were applauding for themselves. And they're applauding for the place in which they worked. And my most fundamental belief is in today's day and age, what we all want with the companies we do business with, what we want with the companies we work in, we want to know who they are and what they're really all about. And in many ways, what people applaud for within Panera, within our own group, is they applaud for the fact that this is who we are, and this is an extension of our values, and we actually operate on them. Let me share with you something else. As our cafes began to self-sustain, it gave us opportunities in our foundation to take that success and double leverage it. What do I mean? Well, we began to have revenues in excess of costs in certain cafes. We said, what can we do again? What's unique to us? What are core companies we can do to take that money and help? And we began to say we could help offering jobs to those in need. And the reality is, there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids that are at risk, that have been ripped off the streets, they don't have homes, they haven't been in school, that are in tremendous pain. And they don't have the ability to survive in our sort of commercial society. And they're in places like Covenant House and the like. We said, let's take some of those kids. We'll do a partnership with somebody like Covenant House. Their job will be to give them the life skills. We'll give them the job skills. And we'll guarantee them if they graduate from the program, we'll give them a job. And I'm pleased to say we've taken tens of people, lots of people who've been through this kind of programming now that are taxpayers working in Paneras in a country. So not only did we were able to deal with food insecurity, but we've actually been able to help teach some people to fish. Okay, what else? What else has come off it? Everything else, you know, you begin something and it begins to inspire something else, and it takes you in a certain place. And Panera Cares inspired us. Some of you saw the Place at the Table film the other night. I know it was featured here. Right? We began to work with some of those folks. We're involved in helping provide some of the resources to help get that off the ground. As well, we've become very involved with Feeding America, which is the largest association of food banks and food shelters around the country. We've become very involved in that. And we're getting involved with No Kid Hungry, which is really a movement rooted in something called Share Our Strength within the food industry to help feed. We're very pleased with what we've been able to do. All of our donations that go in our stores are now organized around food insecurity. Okay, let me share with you something else that we're pretty excited about. We've come up with this idea to try to take it more broadly into the country. We want to take the spirit of Panera Cares and apply it broadly. It's great in 5 cafes in 5 communities, but where do we go with it is the question. This is something we just began last week. We call it a food chain reaction, and it's on Facebook. Go ahead, Kate.
Right now, 1 in 6 people in America doesn't know where their next meal is coming from. But what if you and 4 of your friends decided to feed that 6th person together? And what if you told other people and they decided to help too? So that together we could create a food chain reaction and feed people in need. Visit Panera Bread on Facebook to spread the word about hunger in America. For every circle created, we'll donate a bowl of soup. And you can start a food chain reaction of your own.
Facebook.com, okay? Panera Bread. We've just begun it, but if this works as we hope to be able to offer soup, our own soup, the black bean soup we do to 500,000 people as part of this program. And I think we're going to get there and be able to accomplish it. Okay, let's move it on. Okay, what else? We've begun to engage our own 80,000 people. Right, as they've gotten excited about this, we've begun to form a volunteer corps we call Panera Serves. And we've begun to go out in these communities across America and actually make our own, again, put our own bodies on the line and help to serve people. Okay, let's move on. Okay, and that's only the beginning. I'm not here to talk about it, but everything engenders something else. And success engenders more success. And I can only tell you, we've been playing with a whole bunch of ideas about how we take the spirit of Panera Cares and much of the execution of Panera Cares and apply it, as they all were afraid I would, in a broad way, in some kind of scale across the country. So wait for the next innovation. You'll hear about it soon. Okay, what else? I want to just bring a couple of reflections and wrap it up. Why does Panera Care work, and what's the lesson for others? What can you take away from it? Number one, higher purpose. Giving people the opportunity to make a difference. Folks, people want to do the right thing. They really do. They got to believe they actually are. They got to believe they're doing something. But people want that. And this is rooted in higher purpose. It's rooted in higher purpose without self-interest in a narrow way. And people get it, and they want to be a part of it. Secondly, this has worked because it's about respect for the individual. Right? It's about literally trying to give everybody an experience we all want. And that's a very legitimate thing, and people respond to that. Third, Panera Cares works because it's about transparency. It will fail if there's no trust. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.